We've got not one but two scandals in the Treasury Department. And the more that I look at Scott Bessent in the head of the Treasury, the more I'm convinced we don't just have a Donald Trump problem with the economy. We have a Scott Bessent problem with the economy. I'll just give you two examples, two new scandals, one involving an AI conference being sponsored by Donald Trump Jr.'s company, 1789 Capital, using the seal of the Treasury Department, claiming that Scott Bessent is going to be doing a keynote speech that got so much grief, they had to take down any reference to the Treasury Department. But they were going to, until it was called out by the media, they were going to pimp out the Treasury Secretary and the Treasury Department in order to make more money for the Trump family through 1789 Capital. But that's not even the biggest scandal swirling around Scott Bessent. Have you heard of Argentina? Have you heard about the $20 billion bailout currency exchange using our taxpayer dollars to help Argentina, to bail them out of their quote unquote liquidity problem, but to benefit friends, close friends, and business associates of Scott Bessent, who worked with him closely at George Soros's old fund where Scott Bessent was the fund manager. Two different people, Stan Druckenmiller and Robert Citrone. Robert Citrone connected to CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee, and Stan Druckenmiller owning something called Duquesne Family Office. They're some of the biggest investors in debt of Argentina and in currency of Argentina. The bailout benefits them. Those are friends of Scott Bessent. That's why we're spending $20 billion of your and my money from the Treasury to go down to Argentina. How is that America first? It's not America first. It's investor class first. It's friends of Scott Bessent first. And now we're bailing out Argentina. I'm going to bring these two scandals together as we talk about Scott Bessent and put a laser focus on him here on my Trumponomics Tuesday, first video morning here on Legal AF. Let's start with Argentina. Do we need to bail out Argentina after the International Monetary Fund already did that? No. What is the $20 billion worth of peso bailout through currency swap going to do for Argentina? It's a huge, risky bet. Argentina is on thin ice. Its president, the little mini Trump of the Amazon, is running roughshod over economic policy down there. And that country, as it has been frequently over the last 30, 40 years, is on the brink of collapse. And there goes your and my $20 billion that was exchanged with the Central Bank of Argentina. It's as good as the paper that it's written on. Now, why do it? Well, we look a little deeper, as the Wall Street Journal did, the New York Times did. Stan Druckenmiller, Robert Citrone. Who are those guys? Well, you and I may not know them, but our Treasury Secretary is best friends with them. They all work together at George Soros's fund, which is where George Soros, who's on Donald Trump's enemies list, got all of his money from, or most of his money from. And Stan Druckenmiller and Robert Citrone have invested a ton of money of their own in equity, in debt, and in currency in Argentina. The prime recipient of the benefit from the bailout are best friends with Scott Bessent. What else do I need to say? We're not there for our own economic reasons. It's another prime example of the warped Trump economic policies that don't seem to make sense until you start connecting the dots and the dotted lines to money and friends of Donald Trump or his inner circle. And then it all makes sense. Because if you were just doing independent analysis of what benefits America, you would not be putting $20 billion in to the peso in Argentina to give them more money to hang themselves with and to topple the government or the economy in Argentina. But you would if you're trying a last gasp effort to help your friends. And haven't we just seen that every time there's an economic policy, every time there's a global policy, every time there's a foreign policy of Donald Trump, including the great big Middle East announcement? It all ties back to land deals. That's why the Middle East is 3 real estate developers, Trump, Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, negotiating a land deal masquerading as a peace deal. But when you look at it, It's because Donald Trump and those around him and his family are going to benefit from the Middle East peace deal that he shoved down everybody's throat there. Same thing here. You would not, what I'm trying to say is if you did not have a corrupted Treasury Secretary who wasn't trying to benefit his friends, there would be no economic justification for investing $20 billion into Argentina from America. And those that are on the far right MAGA should be livid of this wasteful money being spent there. Although the whole administration is wasting money left and right. Now let's turn to 1789 Capitol, a pivotal year in U.S. history. It's the date of our first president, George Washington. It's the date of our first Congress, 1789. It's the date of that our Constitution was ratified and took effect, 1789. The Bill of Rights was proposed, and New York started as really our first financial capital. The 1789 Capital Group. Who's in there? Don Jr., Chris Buskirk, a friend of his, and a J.D. Vance donor, and a dozen other people, all related to Donald Trump. What happened? They announced that on October 21, the exact same date as a White House event in which the AI export program was going to be announced or is going to be announced, how we're going to control the export of artificial intelligence through our venture capital and capitalist in chief, David Sachs, who's a right-wing tech podcaster and venture capitalist, but he's also our AI czar, was going to announce. That same day, on 10/21, there was an announcement sent out in an email reported by the Wall Street Journal, raising money, calling it the inaugural U.S. Treasury AI Summit. U.S. Treasury AI Summit with the seal of the Treasury Department, with the keynote speaker, one Scott Bessent. Hooray! Except they had to retract it all because the media went after them and said, are you effing kidding me? You're now going to, like Donald Trump did with cryptocurrency, with the great seal of the presidency of the United States, standing in front of a bunch of people grifting for donations and for purchases of his meme coin, for his dollar sign Trump coin. You're doing that all again with the Treasury Secretary at a private event that the Treasury Secretary is hosting. So they resent it out and they called it instead the AI Summit without reference to the U.S. Treasury Department. But it has a whole bunch of Trumpers in there. State Department speakers are going to be there still on the docket. The White House Economic Council advisors are going to be there. Representatives of other companies that tie themselves back to MAGA, like Palantir, are going to be in the room. And I assume members of the Treasury staff. It doesn't mean that Scott Bessent is still not going to show up, and it's no coincidence that they chose the date of 10/21 and 10/21, one for a White House event, one for the Scott Bessent Treasury event. It just shows you Scott Bessent's willingness to take control of all the levers of power and being a chief enabler of Donald Trump's worst instincts. It's Scott Bessent that was accused of pushing and shoving Elon Musk and Boris Epstein and others. It's very interesting. I thought he was a mild-mannered member of the LGBTQ plus community. He got sworn in as Treasury Secretary with his husband and some kids near him. I thought, well, maybe I had Scott wrong. No. He's done things like he's completely taken over Social Security. He's completely taken over the Internal Revenue Service. He's effectively running both of those agencies. He's shuffling checks during the shutdown, making sure the military gets paid, but nobody else gets paid. It's just, and he's presiding over one of the worst economies in the first 10 months of an administration of all time, other than Hoover and the Depression. And they're rapidly moving into that. It's a jobless economy. It's not making any jobs. It may have marginal growth improvement, even with interest rate cut that came out 3 weeks ago, and probably another cut that's coming up. They're still not making jobs because the administration scares the crap out of business, and they don't want to plan to hire anymore. And AI doesn't need a lot of people to operate, neither does crypto. So if we're growing in AI and crypto, those are not human capital intensive businesses. Scott Bessent, you should resign. You should go off and make money with Stan Druckenmiller and Robert Citron. You should stop using my money to make your investments. And we're going to have to keep a closer eye now on 1789 Capital, another Trump Jr. investment strategy to try to make money from the White House. Remember, this was the same group that was up in arms and started all sorts of congressional investigations over whether Hunter Biden took one board seat in Ukraine because his last name happened to be Biden. Oh my God. Look what we're watching now. Everything that Donald Trump touches has to have a tie back to a money-making proposition for him or his family, or he won't pass it or approve it or enter into the executive order. Plain and simple. And I'll continue to follow it right here. Tuesday, Legal AF, hit the free subscribe button, come over to Legal AF Substack, do the exact same thing. If you really want to help us become a paid member of Substack by hitting the paid button, and now you get all of our great content and help support us for the price of a cup of coffee every month. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touches Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.